this is now the end of my time in Kunming. I've been here for so many months, and this is a special time in my life. I said at the end of the letter, this gym, obviously I can only express myself imperfectly in Chinese anyway. This gym will become a happy memory for me. While I lived in Kunming, during this time in my life, studying Chinese, this gym was the only pleasure in my life. It was the only thing I had to enjoy, And it's true in the original Chinese. That is a little bit bittersweet at best, the connotations of the particular words that come across. There was one guy here who, he pitched a little bit of a fit. He was an idiot. I despised him. There was an American guy here who was one of the other students, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation started, but he said something to me like, "But that's why you love learning Chinese, right? Like, but that's why you want to learn Chinese." Something about Chinese being wonderful, and ascribing to me that this is why I want to learn Chinese. I don't know. That's not why I want to learn Chinese. I said, I don't want to learn Chinese at all. Which was true then, and it's true now. This is not what I chose in life. This is in many ways, fundamentally, the opposite of what I chose in life. This is everything that I wanted to avoid being forced on me by circumstances beyond my control. I don't want to be living in China. I don't want to be learning Chinese. I do want to be studying languages, but Chinese is the wrong language. And another conversation with someone who was a Tibetan, and I remember this Tibetan was talking to me, and excited about my knowledge of politics and history, but of course Buddhism. If you guys watch the channel, I know a lot about Buddhism. And I had to say to this Tibetan, look, I know we have a lot to talk about, but my whole life is about avoiding Tibet. I want nothing to do with Tibet. I want nothing to do with Tibetan politics. I want nothing to do with Tibetan Buddhism. I don't want to study Tibetan as language. You don't get it. I know more than the average Westerner about Tibet. I do, obviously, way more of, than the average Westerner, but it's not my area of expertise, not my area of interest. It's the opposite. So, but to come back to that anecdote, I remember, sitting there at the breakfast table with the other students, I just said to this guy 100% bluntly, 100% honestly, I said, I don't want to be learning Chinese at all, but I'm born with a Canadian passport, and I'm stuck with it. And because I'm Canadian, I ultimately did not have the option to study any of the languages I was passionate about learning. I was forced again and again to sacrifice all of my hopes, all of my aspirations, all of my dreams, all of my career plans because of the incredibly poor quality of the education system in Canada and the incredibly narrow possible career paths open to me. It wouldn't be the same if I were born a French citizen. It wouldn't be the same if I were born an American citizen or even a German citizen. But because I'm Canadian, I couldn't continue with Lao, I couldn't continue with Cambodian, I couldn't continue with Burmese, I couldn't continue with Sinhalese, I couldn't continue with Thai, I couldn't continue with Cree, I couldn't continue with Ojibwe, and those two I feel the most bitterly as a Canadian, Cree and Ojibwe being indigenous to Canada. Everything I spent years and years of my life developing expertise in, not even to mention Pali, I had to sacrifice, and I had to start with this language that I don't merely lack interest in, that I actively don't want to learn, that I never wanted to learn, that I chose again and again to avoid learning. This is everything I wanted to avoid in my life, and I've been forced to accept it. That's why I'm living now in China. And I didn't say this at the time, but also, I didn't even want to learn Chinese in China. I wanted to continue in Canada. I was getting a university degree in Canada, but I couldn't do that for the same reason, because of the abysmally low quality of my education in Canada. So there are a lot of things I appreciate about Chinese culture. There are a lot of things I appreciate about China. It's always somewhat hilarious to me when people think I have a kind of glamorized view of Chinese culture or China, because it's the opposite. But I'm here learning a language I don't want to learn, doing a job I don't want to do, in a sense, developing a career in an area of expertise I don't want to have, in the surreal circumstances of my slow motion divorce unfolding in France. We think also my slow motion court case unfolding in Thailand. All these other bizarre things in framing the situation. And I'm sacrificing so much in my life to learn a language I don't want to learn, and to learn to pretend to be a part of a culture I don't even want to pretend to be a part of. I don't want to marry into this culture. I don't want to date in this culture. And, the guy I said this to at that breakfast, he was really offended. And he was an ignorant ass white guy who converted to Buddhism, to Zen Buddhism, the worst kind of Buddhism. He was an ignorant ass white boy who converted to Buddhism and who obviously had glorified and glamorized notions about Chinese culture. And he took it up with me later too. Like at another time, I went out to lunch with him, and he sat down and he was like, "Well, it's very obvious you don't like Chinese, like as a language. Like you don't." It's like, yeah, you want me to lie to you? You want me to pretend this is a special or wonderful language to me? It's not. It's it's just another language, and it's in many ways an especially terrible language. And it's not a language that leads to any kind of a bright future for me or for my daughter. It doesn't lead to any kind of employment in Canada. It doesn't lead to any kind of master's degree or PhD or anything else. In many ways here in China, I know day after day I'm digging my own grave. I'm destroying any possibility of me having a positive future. And I would be earning more money if I got a job at Starbucks, or as a waiter, or stocking the store shelves at a grocery store, or working at a gas station in Canada, rather than what I'm doing here in China, even though what I'm doing here in China may be more intellectually pretentious or may seem more impressive on my resume in some ways. So, that's the incredibly grim reality surrounding and underlining that one line in that handwritten letter that I gave to the girl at the gym today. That during this time in my life, going to your gym was my only pleasant distraction, was my only pleasure.